एकं अक्षरं हृदि निरन्तरं भासते स्वयं लिख्यते कथम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् अहम् इति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जता अनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो देहं मृण्मयं जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तद्भावशुद्धिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भावतः कोऽहं भावतः कुतो वरधिय दृष्टात्मनिष्टात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं. नमो रमण. With Bhagavan's immense grace, we have been meditating on Sri Dakshinamurthy Stotram, composed by Adi Shankara Bhagavad-pada, and the work has been translated into Tamil by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, and we have been relying on Bhagavan's translation for the meditation on its meaning. Just give me a minute. The layout of the work, as pointed out by Bhagavan, we have taken up as the total of the 10 verses is looked at in this manner, that the first 3 are on the world, how the world, Vishwam, is nothing other than the Atma Swarupam. The 4, 5, 6 is how the Jiva is nothing other than the Atma Swarupam, the Brahma Swarupam. And 7, 8, 9 are on the Ishvara, the light that reveals everything, the real light of consciousness, Irundolir, existence consciousness, which is always shining and which is what is revealing all experiences. That is covered, how that Ishvara is not other than the self, the Brahman, is covered in 7, 8, 9. We have seen the 7th verse in the last satsang. We are now into the 8th verse about the light that reveals everything. Vishwam pashyati karya karanataya swaswami sambandhatah शिष्याचार्यतया तथैव पितृपुत्राध्यात्मना भेदतः स्वप्ने जागृति वाय एष पुरुषो माया परिभ्रामितः तस्मै श्री गुरुमूर्तये नमयिदं Sri Dakshinamurthaye has been translated by Bhagavan as Ulagayar Ippumanu Urumpala Nana Kanavil Kalangiye Mayayale Karya Karanampin Talevanum Dasan Sidan Guru Mahan Tandai Adi Talamuru Guruvam Anda Dakshina Murti Potri Talamuru Guruvam Anda Dakshina Murti Potri is the verse which we are taking up from the previous verse, which went into the various avasthas, the avasthas of the Bhalyadishu, Jagradadishu. By Balyadishu, the Jivas avasthas which it experienced as the body were covered. Jagradadishu, in one sense, are the Ishvara's body. The Ishvara's body, the Stula, Sukshma, and the Karana. And in one sense, that is what we are going to see in these 3 verses. The Jagradadishu, Sanmatra Karano, Samharanato, Yobut Sushuptat Puma. That is the previous verse. Balyadishvapi Jagradadishu Tata Sarvasva Vastasvapi Vyavrittasvanu Vartamana Mahamit Yantaspurantam Sada. The Vyavritta Anuvritta Nyaya was taken up to show that at any given point there is both the changing and the unchanging in any avastha, whether it be the sub-avasthas of poverty or relative richness. Those poverty and relative richness are changing. You can superimpose it on. Only in waking state you have something related to richness. In deep sleep, it is, you can call it complete richness or complete poverty. But then it is like that. And in all those avasthas, there is something that is unchanging. That is Anuvartamanam, which is the I. Antaspurantam Sada. That Antaspurantam Sada Atmam, that is the truth, that is the self of all, that is Anuvartamanam, it is unchanging, and that is Prakati Karoti. The Dakshinamurthy Swami is only revealing that Anuvartamanam, the Spurana nature, which is the reality of the light that reveals everything, all the avasthas, by taking up both Balyadishu as well as Jagradadi, the avasthas of all states and Itara avasthas are also included, and all of them are substratically supported by the Vyavrittartha, the Aham Antaspurantam Sada. That is Prakati Karot. Dakshinamurti reveals that Spuranam is there as the Adharam. To whom? To those who are surrendering to him. Prakati Karoti Bhajatam Yo Mudraya Bhadraya. Through the auspicious mudra of Chinmudra and the Maunam, he reveals that. And we saw that in Bhagavan Sannidhi, in that Maunam, many of the sadhakas, many of the devotees, their minds would just dissolve, and the aham spuranam, the amtaspuranam sada, that nature, that is who we are, will be revealed to them in the mere presence of the Dakshinamurthy avataram, that is Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. We saw that in the discussion on the last verse. And the current verse appears simple, but it is another holistic way of looking at the whole sadhana and siddhate. We have to just focus on one of the relationships mentioned here, because this verse itself is about all is one, one is all kind of thing that we always keep repeating. That all is only one. We say that, but in that all, we forget that the moment we mention that one as all, we come into the relative. We have mentioned many things put together, and that togetherness itself is relative. Whereas in the oneness of all lies the solution. In the absolute lies the solution. So, how the absolute appearing as the relative puts us into the apparent bondage, apparent sambandham, apparent the pashu, the attachments that are there, that are created by apparent relationships. That is what we are going to see in this verse. How that same one light, when it is forgotten, when it is lost sight of, it suddenly is seen. The same light only, when it forgets to look at itself, its unity, it suddenly sees many things. And how it sees these many things and how the relationships come is what is the secret mentioned in this verse. And meditating on this verse, we go to the self of all, which is the nature of Ishvara. But let's begin with Vishwam Pashyati, that one light, when it comes into the relative area, it sees the world. And this is how Bhagavan begins the body of Ulladu Narpad also. Nam Ulagam Kantalal. That means the moment you come into seer and seen, there is relationship, there is relativity, there is broken nature from the absolute. The absolute is now divided as at least two. So, Nam Ulagam Kantalal, Vishwam Pashyati. The moment that one light, forgetting itself, wants to see the world, just create the relationship of seeing the world, then immediately that all the broken up nature of the objective space starts. When we listen to the story of the Srinivasa Mahima in Tirupati, I have seen it only in the screen, and there it is revealed that only forgetting his nature as the self, he takes the avataram there as that human being, and then slowly realizes who he is, and in that very process of realization, all the purpose of the avatara is fulfilled. But then that is how it is the same. He has not become another. The self has not become divided. But the mere act of apparent forgetfulness allows for this whole srishti to be seen. Vishwam Pashyati Karya Karanataya. We will have to stop there and see about Karya Karanataya, because this cause and effect is the major problem that the intellect creates. That anything that comes, immediately we look for what is the problem, what is the root cause for this. Let me analyze. If we remove the root cause, this will be solved. Or where can I go and end this? What will be the final form of this problem, so that the problem will be solved? So what will be the effect of my efforts to solve the problem? We are constantly going from cause to effect, cause to effect. So Karya Karanataya is what we are going to discuss a little bit before going into the other segmentations in the work. there was an article discussing the root karya karanataya in our sadhana. Like, forget about the Harvard inquiry into the karanam for happiness. We have seen that there has been a 75-year-old study in the Harvard University taking more than 700 people, half of them or nearly half of them Harvard students in the 1930s, 1938, I think it has begun, and half of them from the slums and the difficult to live places of Boston. And they have kept that group interviewed every 2 years as to what they feel as the cause for their happiness, the karanam. And they find that in the outside, in the test group, 80% of them felt that in the beginning, they all feel that money is the cause. 80% of the test group and also the people outside, they all feel money is the cause for happiness. 50% of them, nearly 50% of them feel that if they become famous, they will be happy. Fame is the cause for happiness. But as the time rolls out, as the years of experience pool in as data with the research institute, 75 years and 4 directors later, the current director comes out with the finding that what really gives happiness is not money, is not your education. In fact, he says that the non-Harvard students, they keep asking, why are you interviewing me? I am such a normal, ordinary person. What are you going to find out through this? Whereas he says none of the Harvard students even later ever asked that their self-importance, when they have learned something, their self-importance, keeping the I in front, is so high. Whereas for the normal, uneducated person, feels is quite normal, one with everyone. What is so special in me? Like that. But then what do they find out? They find out that in still Karya Karanataya only, they find out that if anybody has one relationship that has stood the test of time, that has stood the ups and downs of life, that has stood the test of various challenges of trust and doubt. That relationship is what brings happiness to one person, which is according to them lasting happiness. But then, even that, the relationship based happiness is all culminated in Bhakti Marga to our relationship with God. We clearly understand relationship with another human being is terminal. So we don't take the Harvard study beyond that extent, only to reject the importance or the cause connection of money, fame, and other things, education, self-importance, all those things, to reject them, we can use the Harvard study, that it is the relation, it is the sambandha between one human being and another human being, which is going to bring in lasting happiness in this worldly life, according to Harvard. From there, we proceed to see that human relationship is ephemeral, that our sambandha with Ishvara, with God in bhakti, is more long lasting. If we are having a satisfactory relationship with God, then we can be happy, is what Bhakti Marga says. And we in the morning satsang went through an article which delineates the Bhakti Marga beautifully. One by Kameshwar Rao from somewhere in Andhra Pradesh, I think, I'm not sure where. He narrates the changes that came in his relationship with God over a period of many years. And what are we going to do? We are going to use the Sukshma Sharira to meditate and learn years of relationship with God, what it has transformed this bhakta into. That is still happiness through relationship. We have not yet come to the inquiry into that which is beyond all relationships. We are still taking the Anya Bhakti, and see, we have progressed from, so to say, the bhakti on money, the bhakti on education, the bhakti on the worldly fame, and even that bhakti which is brought about in relationship with one other human being which has stood the test of time, crossed all that, have the bhakti with God. Now he is a family man and his son is having smallpox. And he writes a letter to the ashram. My son is ill. He doesn't say what kind of illness. My son is ill. May we have Bhagavan's blessings for both the ill child and the parents. He writes like that. And that son who is having smallpox, he is being cared for by a relative lady, his sister or his wife's sister, I'm not sure. And the moment the letter is posted, she comes and says that she has a vision that in our local tradition, the belief is that smallpox is caused by Amman, some kind of papam, some kind of non-completion of task with Amman. And Amman appears as the smallpox. And to that lady who is giving care, Amman appears in vision and says, I am going and you take care of the child. And in 4-5 days, a letter comes from Ramanashram. Your child will be cured of smallpox and you have the blessings of Bhagavan. So he gets this into his mind. How did Bhagavan come to know that my son had smallpox? That I did not mention it in my letter. How did Bhagavan come to know? Another time, what happens? His family, along with his mother and wife and others, have to leave for Tiruvannamalai. The taxi has come to go to the railway station, I think. And he gets a strong feeling that he should not go. Something is telling from within him that don't go. And it is to Ramanashram. And he heeds that call and sends the taxi back. And within an hour, they get a telegram saying that some close relative is so ill that his mother has to be there in that place. Then he realizes that his relationship with Bhagavan is so strong that Bhagavan could intuitively tell him, don't go, there is some other work. And his mother leaves, and that child there is once again said to be very seriously ill. And again, a prayer is made. Again, the boy is given a lease of life. At this time, the inquiry about how did Bhagavan come to know about the disease of my son becomes very strong. He starts asking about that doubt to various devotees. And one of the devotees says, Bhagavan is a jnani. He will be knowing what is happening in your place. So, why do you want to find out? He will know whatever happens in your life. But that answer did not satisfy him. He says, kept on asking with other devotees till he got this answer that it's a very beautiful answer which brings the sambandha between the devotee and the Ishvara to a very close communion. The answer is like this. That devotee tells him, see, Bhagavan is like a radio station, constantly sending the radio waves, broadcasting the radio waves in a particular wavelength. That is, the grace of Bhagavan is constantly being sent to you. All you have to do is to tune to that wavelength. In your sadhana, your attention should be fine-tuned in such a way that you are able to be in connection, in sambandham, in relationship with that grace, which is Vispurana, Antaspurantam Sada. We have to be fine-tuned so that you are able to listen. You are able to be in tune with that Antaspurantam Sada, the wavelength in which Bhagavan is constantly transmitting grace. And you don't need to report him the shortcomings at home. You don't need to report him what things you want. You don't need to feel that his blocks are any kind of restriction. His blocks are only for good. There is nothing in that grace which is constantly flowing. There is nothing like regress. Any stop is also good. Any flow is also good. So the difference between ebb and flow in life goes into what? Into merely fine-tuning yourself so that to be directly related to the Antaspurantam Sada, grace of Bhagavan. Bhagavan is also not calculating your faults. He is constantly radiating the grace, and all you have to do is stop looking at your own faults, shortcomings, this or that. Constantly keep fine tuning yourself only to be in tune with the grace and coming to all in one. When that the attention of the jiva is in complete tune with that grace, the jiva ishvara aikyam, the oneness between the individual relative spirit, which seems to be having so many sambandhas, so many relationships, trying to get happiness, finding that happiness cannot be in money, cannot be in learning, cannot be in fame, it cannot even be in one relationship which has stood the test of time. It has got to be found in God. And in finding in God, years and years, we keep reporting to Him, this is not all right, that is not all right, money is not enough, this is not enough. And sometime we come to that point where we have the maturity to understand there is no need to report to Him these things. There is no need to seek anything from Him. There is no need to feel that there is a flow or an ebb of life. There is only one thing to do, that we have to fine tune ourselves to the wavelength of the grace transmission from the Ishvara. And that is where this verse comes in. That understanding the years and years of life and learning about our relationship with the Supreme Being, having worked out that our relationship with all the limited beings will only come to that much, can come only that far, can come to a laya sthiti, but can never bring us real happiness, real knowledge, or real existence. And having been related to God in bhakti for so many years and really worked through all that and come to a point where the mind is not fretting with what it is not having, mind is not fretting with what it should have, it is not fretting with the ebb and flow of life, but is only looking to fine tune itself with that grace of Ishvara. That is where we come to the uh, karya karanataya, that we stop looking for causes and effects and only come to the point where the mind is in one mode, is in one mode of its relationship with the Swarupa, and is now detached from the multiplicity of the objects that were seemingly attracting it. But all the time, its own ajnana was leading it to be attracted to them, and is now Vishwam Pashyati Karya Karanataya. Now, who is the one who has gone through all this? Who has gone through investigating the various forms of objects, the various forms of love, bhakti, the various forms of ananda, finally come to understand that its own relationship with God, having really worked through all those alternatives, that gentleman is able to condense that years of living into one letter for us. And it should not be merely treated that we have understood it. No. It should touch, it should touch our ground reality, that we are able to live like that. That our own life stops finding faults to be rectified, stops finding new things to be had, stops finding the ebb and flow to be obstructing or to be releasing, but only to hold the Supreme, our relationship with the Supreme as the only thing to be considered. There, the cause and effect relationship goes when the relative I merges in the absolute and finds that its very nature is the Dakshinamurthy Swarupam. And the verse says it is the Dakshinamurthi Swarupam which is now appearing to be the Jiva, has come into all these relationships. Maya Paribhramita, due to the Brandam, the confusion arising out of self-forgetfulness, the power of veiling. Because of that, it feels that it has itself come into so many relationships. What are those relationships? That's what we are going to see now that we have got an overall view of how this relationship area has to be removed till the relationship as seer seen itself is removed. How is the bandham first arising? The bandham is arising because the self seems to want to know itself. So the very desire to know itself is what makes it rise as the Spuranam, the first I. and that manifests as the many, as the individual ego sense, which then manifests as many layers of time and space, and these relationships expand as many people, many things, from which we try to decipher as to from where we are going to make sense of all these things. That is the singular meaning of how the self has lost itself in the Karya Karanataya. Vishwam Pashyati Karya Karanataya. That one pointer, Karyam and Karanam. We have to investigate it thoroughly because it reveals everything. We were discussing in another satsang how this Karya Karanam extends even into Brahmavid Varya, Brahmavid Varenya, where Bhagavan is asked by Swami Natanananda that how is it that you say that the Brahmavid, Brahmavidvara, Brahmavid Varenya, Brahmavid Varishta, all the four are Jnanis, all the four are Jivan Muktas. Then when knowing that the Brahmavid Varishtate is there, why is the Brahmavid person keeping quiet? Why doesn't he want to be or be realized as the Brahmavid Varishta? And Bhagavan gives the answer that there is no question of wanting there. The sambandham between the Jivan Mukta and the Ishvara, it changes to get to attain the Jivan Mukti. To attain Jivan Mukti or come to the first stage of Brahmavid itself, you should stop having doership. You should stop attributing doership on anyone. The desiring to do this, the desiring to do that is gone. Then only the Brahmavid title is given to such a one. Then only the Jivan Mukti, the Jiva nature is, let me do this, get that and become something. Whereas that doership, when it goes, the tables are changed. That is where the Jivan Mukti is there. But the differences between Brahmavid, Brahmavid Varya, Brahmavid Varenya and Varishta, the differences are due to Prarabdha, which are determined by Ishvara, Bhagavan says. That means even for Brahmavid, Brahmavid Varya, Brahmavid Varenya, there is Prarabdha. Only for Varishta, only for the transcendental one, the relationship between him and Ishvara changes into unity of the self. That for him alone, he has, and Bhagavan being Varishta, he states that there is no Prarabdha for anybody. The relationship between us and karma, the relationship between Jiva and karma, according to Bhagavan, is that there is no karma. Whereas if you go to other branches of where the Advaita, the teaching will be that you will be given Jivan Mukti, that is, you will become a Brahmavid, and from there on, the Deha, the body has to work out his Prarabdha. And when the Prarabdha is ended, then the Videha Mukti is also given, is the general teaching. But Bhagavan being a Varishta teaches only that Varishtate, that there is no Bandha Mukti Tamparam Sukham. What is the relationship between bondage, Mukti and the Jiva? The cause and effect. Is the sadhana the cause of liberation? Bhagavan says in Ulladhanarpada, is the sadhana the cause and the effect is the realization? No, he says. Sadhagattile duvidam, sadhyatil adduvidam, ஓதுகின்றவாதமதும் உண்மையல்ல ஆதரவாய் தான் தேடும் காலம் தன்னை அடைந்த காலத்தும் தான் தசமன் என்று யார். That is, even at the time of search, the turiya is there. Even at the time of realization, the turiya is there. At the time of search, the turiya is the adhara. The relationship between the seeker and the turiya is the adhara for the seeker. In realization, the turiya is independent. But was it dependent sometime and independent some other time? It was always independent. Therefore, there is nothing like sadhagattile duvidam, sadhyatil adduvidam. The self alone is, there is no difference between the relationship between the sadhana and the liberation, is that there is no relation. The liberation is always the freeness of the self. What is the relationship between karma and mukti? That Vinay Mudal Namayin Vilaypayan Tuipo, Vinay Mudal Yar and Vinavi, Tanayari, Kartaratvam Poi, Karma Mundrum Kadalu, Nittama Mukti Nilai. That there is no karma There is no jiva. Nitya, always the self alone is. The relationship between the individual and the karma is completely obliterated by the Brahmavid Varishta. What is the relationship between bondage and liberation? Bandha muktyati tamparam sukham vindati iha jivastu daivikaha. That the bondage itself is obliterated. Therefore, as the bondage is not there for the jiva, there is nothing like liberation. So there is no sambandham, there is no karyam, there is no karan. In the self alone is, the self alone is. There is no bondage, there is no liberation. That is where Bhagavan is taking us. But from there, which is the reality, how do we experience? We experience Vishwam Pashyati Karya Karanataya. Whether it is the area of bondage or area of liberation, we always want to know what is the cause, what is the result. Whereas the self, in the self, the Atmaswarupam, there is no cause, there is no result, there is no bondage, there is no liberation. There is only the self. There is only the Atmaswarupam. Who becomes a Brahma with Varishta? Only when one understands that everyone is a Brahma with Varishta, such a one alone can abide as Brahma with Varishta. If he feels anybody else is having any lesser state, that state will not be natural to such a one. What you see as the state of all alone can be your reality. We get that from all is one, one is all. If you say anyone in the all is any lesser than you, obviously you have to come to that state. That is why we find in Bhagavan's dealings always he will identify with the lowest of the low. He will identify even with the concrete slabs because to him that is also as full of consciousness as the human beings who are putting questions to him. So the Karya Karanataya, each of us, let us dwell on it properly. The rest of the verse flows easily. Vishwam Pashyati Karya Karanataya Swaswami Sambandata. The Swaswami Swa is an object which can be owned or possessed. Swami is the owner. So the relationship can be that one feels one is the owner of an object and that object is the object of possession. Obviously, you can look at it as Karya Karanataya. Who can claim possession? Only the consciousness, relative consciousness, can say this is mine, that is not mine. Therefore, you can reduce it to Karya Karanataya. If you originate that thought, Vinay Mudal Namaya, if you want to claim possession of that, then you will be related only to that. You will be unrelated to the rest of the all. So, Karya Karanataya Swaswami Sambandataha Sishyacharya, the Ishvara and the devotee relationship we saw in detail in V. Kameshwar Rao's account. Very beautiful account present in the Fragrant Petals. He delineates his whole bhakti journey. The same journey can be considered to happen between Guru and Sishya. The Acharya and Sishya, that is another relationship into which can be looked up as equal to Ishvara and devotee relationship, because the disciples are as devoted to the Guru as the devotee is devoted to the Ishvara. That is why the Ishvara and Guru and Atma, they are not different, says Bhagavan, that they are all one. To see them as different itself creates sambandha. You say that Guru is greater, and you will fight with the devotees who say that Ishvara is greater. So that is where the sambandha comes, the relationship comes, and problems come. Swaswami sambandhatah sishyacharya taya tataiva pitruputradhyatmanah. We have so many relationships. I call myself as father in relationship to my daughter. Whereas in relationship to my father, I become the son. Therefore, these are relative. They are not real. That is why in Shastras, they say that there is no lakshanam. Ilakkanam means grammar. Grammar means definition. That is, there should not only be the chaitanyam or the pramanam to define the existence of an object, there should also be an ilakkanam. The lakshya should be definable. Then only we can say this object is like this, that this object is so and so. But if the same object you can say as father and you can say as son, then is the father existing or not existing? Is the son existing or not existing? There, you cannot say that. That you cannot say give ilakkanam to that. You cannot define that. That is why this is called Maya. That the same object, how it can be both seen from one angle, it is something; seen from another angle, it is totally different thing. This is more or less what Einstein finds through his special relativity and general relativity. Even the special relativity is easy to understand. Even general relativity, what was considered as fixed by the earlier physicists, he finds that space does not exist. The space is malleable. The time is malleable. He comes and fixes speed of light. Later on, that speed of light itself is malleable at some points. That is found by other people who start investigating into quantum physics. But then, not ours is not the inquiry into the objective area. But even they come into the fragility of the relative study. And the acharyas, the gurus, the rishis, they have investigated very thoroughly the whole area of relationship, including the area of relationship with the Ishvara, which is in the Bhakti Marga. What all the ebbs and tides you can have in Bhakti, and how they can be understood as leading you to the Upasana through Dhyana and Upasana through Atmavichara. And that relationship gets studied into just being fine-tuned to the grace of God. And coming here, that the same one is called father at some point, and the same one is called as son at some point. And Bhagavan makes this clear to a devotee who is coming to the ashram to have darshan. Finding that Bhagavan has gone for his walk up the hill, he goes up the hill and finds Bhagavan coming down. Obviously, he is elated having darshan of Bhagavan. He says, "Oh Bhagavan," he does the pranams and he says, "Oh Bhagavan, I am so happy I had your darshan." And that same circumstance, that sannivesha, that particular situation, Bhagavan says, "Why are you saying you gave me darshan? Why are you saying that I gave you darshan? Why can't you say that you, the devotee, gave me darshan?" The same sannivesha, the same circumstance, the same event can be looked at in two ways. Let us see that in relationship to a difficulty. In 1993 or 94, there was a difficulty which remained a difficulty for me, which is something that should not have happened to me, I was feeling. And that very difficulty became the object of dhyana for me, because if that difficulty were not to be there, I would have dispersed my attention. And that dhyana on the difficulty made me make the right choices in selecting what would be the right solution for it, till such a level that it did not stop coming to who am I and Bhagavan. When I came to Bhagavan, I started thanking that difficulty, which allowed for sincere sadhana for years, that the same thing which I was defining as a problem became the best thing that could have happened to me. That means the whole thing turned on its head, that there is nothing really good or really bad, and the most difficult thing that happened to you becomes the most best thing that could have been possible. So it's absolutely relative, isn't it? The only thing that is absolute is the self-attention. So in this area, if you get trapped in this sambandham, in this relationship, what you will be looking at as something very stable, this much insurance I am having, this much, hardly can it be of any security. We will realize hardly of any stability, because it is still in the relative area. Till we come into the absolute, that is our oneness with the Supreme Spirit. Our oneness with the Supreme Spirit, there is not going to be any kind of real security. Sishya acharyataya tataiva pitru putradhyatmana betada. The same Atma is divided into subject and object. The same Atma, and Bhagavan says this root relationship and as subject and object is definitely ephemeral. It is unreal. It is present only in waking and dream, where the mind arises, and it vanishes in deep sleep, where mind is not there. So the reality is that the real sambandha, the real place where the sambandhas are all crossed, is that from which thoughts arise and that into which the thoughts or the mind subsides. That is one place. That one place from which thoughts arise, the spurana, the ham spurana, from which all thoughts arise and into which all thoughts set, that is the reality. That is the Atma Swarupa. That is Dakshinamurthy Swarupa. That is Turiya Atita. That is not even the Turiya as a support. That the Turiya as a support, we were discussing in another satsang, is considered to be one of the four components with which all the worlds are made. See, the worlds have to be permeated by Turiya, has to be permeated by the higher dimension of liberation. All the worlds are said to be made of these four combinations: waking, dream, deep sleep, and Turiya. But the Turiya itself is made relative there because it is one of the four elements. The Turiya as the support is different, the Turiya as Adita is different. So, where does the Jivan Mukti in traditional Vedanta take us? It takes us to the Turiya as support, and we realize that the Turiya is the real doer. We start seeking the Turiya inside the Aham Spurana. The moment you understand that the Turiya is the real doer, we have got Jivan Mukti. When we understand that there is nothing else to know other than the Turiya Spurana, then we are into the omniscience with the omniscience of the self. When we understand that the Turiya alone is, that there is nothing like knowing, there is nothing like seeing, there is only being this Purana, which is what Bhagavan says. Ulladunara unarvu verinmayin ulladunarvagum mundipara unarve namayul mundipara. You cannot know the self except by being the self, where the jiva merges completely into the Turiya, where the Turiya itself is seen to be Atita, transcendent. That is where Bhagavan says that there is no bondage, there is no liberation, there is no relative. There is only the self of all. So through the immanent, we seek the connection with the Supreme. We come to the Turiyam as the support. From Turiyam as the support, which still has relationship, we come to the Turiyam as independent. And that is our real nature, says Bhagavan, who is none other than Dakshinamurthy Swami. Swapne Jagrati Vaya Yesha Purusho Maya Paribramitaha. Where these Vedas are visible, these Vedas are visible in Swapnam and Jagrat. Why they are visible? What is the Mula Karana that prevents us from identifying with the Turiyam, with the Spuranam, with the Aham Ahamiti, Antaspurantam Sada? It is Maya, it is self-forgetfulness, it is the veiling. Once that veiling is removed by the Dakshinamurthy Swami's Anugraha, then we identify total with the transcendental Turiyam. That is, it is not merely immanent. The immanent itself is the transcendental. The immanent is not different from the transcendental. When the immanent Turiya is taken as different from transcendental, we have the different kinds of Jivan Mukti. Brahmavid, Brahmavid Varya, Brahmavid Varyanya, Brahmavid Varishta, all their situations are determined by the Prarabdha as determined by the Turiya, which is the support. But then Bhagavan doesn't ask us to stop there, doesn't ask us to stop with Sambandham. He asks us to continue the inquiry till the immanent itself is found to be the transcendent. There is no relationship between the immanent self and the transcendent self. They are one and the same. There, the relativity comes to an end. And that is the lone teaching of Bhagavan, who stands as the Turiyam Eva. Turiyam itself is Turiya Tita. He says in Ulladunarpadu Anubandham. When is Turiya itself is Turiya Tita? When one abides in Bhagavan as the Atita Sthiti, as the Brahmavid Varishta, as the Turiyaga, then the immanent itself is transcendent. There is no bondage, there is no liberation, there is no one bound, there is no one seeking liberation. That is the Ajata Sthiti. In the Ajata Sthiti, nothing has been created. Only if creation is there, one has to see how to come out of that relationship. There is no Pashyati, there is no Vishwam, there is no Pashyati, there is only the Atma Swarupam, there is only the Turiya, there is only the Turiya Atitam, there is only the Brahma Swarupam, where Bhagavan is able to teach us relentlessly that Bandha Mukti Atitam Param Sukam Vindati Iha Ji Vastu Devikaha Ahamapetakam Nijavibhalakam Mahadidam Tapo Ramanavagi. This Mahadidam Tapo makes us experience the oneness with Ishvara, not even as the Ishvara supporting the sadhana and the mukti. It is till we realize that Ishvara is independent, is the Turiya Atitam, the Atma Vicharam will not leave us, and it will make us realize the truth indicated in this verse and the other verses of Sri Dakshinamurthy Swarupam, because these verses and the translation have come to us right from the source, right from the ones abiding as the Turiyaga, the Atita Sthiti, where the immanent is one with the transcendent. The Jiva is no more to be found. There is only the self of all. And that is what we are going to practice in Atma Vicharam till 8 o'clock when we can listen to Akka. Ujjalji, can we request you to set the time till 8 o'clock? Thank you.
Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings, by which immense grace we are being taken on the journey back to steady abidance in that very self. And I would say today's journey through the Dakshinamurthy Stotram has been as beautiful and sweet as the journey in all the other verses. But for me, personally, the gem today which I got was, there is no succor in anything other than the self. There is no solace in anything other than the self. I think the word which was used by Nandakumar was solace. There is no solace in anything other than the self. And this was beautifully highlighted for us through that phrase, Karya Karanataya. And it took my mind back to one of the dance dramas with which we have been blessed, where the protagonist is crowned the best person, the best woman in the world for all her qualities, beginning with her beauty. And in that dance drama, in that journey, that quality comes to her and says, the crown does not belong to you. If you have been crowned for your beauty, the crown doesn't belong to you, says beauty, it belongs to me. If you have been crowned for health, the crown doesn't belong to you, it belongs to health. If you have been crowned because you are a very loving person, you are a famous person, you are an accomplished person, then the crown belongs to fame and not to you. Because if this beauty goes away, if health goes away, if fame goes away, and if you're a very loving person, says love, then also the crown doesn't belong to you. Who can guarantee if I go away from you, you will not be a loving person? It's an attribute. It's an attribute that you have. And so it goes on to goodness and then to even to discrimination. If you think you are a person who understands you are not all this, who intellectually can discriminate that you are not all this, even that does not give you any greatness, because this power of discrimination, if it disappears from you, what will you do? What will you be left with? And finally, the last attribute to come is the attribute of spiritual experience, which also says, see, even spiritual experience may go away from you. This is the beautiful point which came today, where even the transcendent has to merge into that which is immanence. And that is the Shiva Shakti Aikyam, which is symbolized in the Kartika Deepam, which is symbolized in the story where the great mother, divine mother, she decides to test Shiva's eyes. So the transcendent separates itself from the immanent. So what Nandakumarji has told us today in this is that we cannot find the Karana or the solace in any of these things, although each one is very beautiful and one may be more beautiful than the other. As we progress, this loving one person or having one person to love you makes your life full and steady, very, very important. But then these are not guaranteed. None of these are guaranteed. And we ourselves may lose them. All these may be there. If there is a malfunction in the brain, we lose everything and we could go into another state. Or forget about malfunction. With a very beautiful, functioning, normal brain, normal experience, having had a beautiful day, we may go to sleep and have a nightmare. Who will help us during that nightmare? Not all the steady relationships of the, not all the wealth, not anything, not all the goodness that is bestowed upon us during the waking point. This is the parable of King Janaka. It says, what is the use of being a king with all these facilities? Didn't help me in my dream. I suffered at that point of time. So where is the real solace? So the real solace, Nandakumar ji has emphasized for us today, is obviously not in any attribute of this identity. And ultimately, it is not the real solace, is not even in the Aham Spurana, which is transcendent, but only in the steady merger of the Aham Spurana in the self. So, because Aham Spurana is also limited in terms of time. It is also an experience which may come and go. Initially, also during sadhana, one may experience the Aham Spurana, and then it may go away. The experience, Anubhava, may go away. So, unless this Aham Spurana has merged into the self and steadily the self has taken over, after which, as I understand from the various sharings which Nandakumar ji has had with us about the text of Bhagavan, once there is Sahaja Nishtha, after that, as Bhagavan says in his experience, the Aham Spurana may manifest for interaction in the world. It becomes the vehicle for interaction in the world and then gets back to its true absolute stillness, absolute achalatva. But this is the final succor, the final solace has to be only in abiding in the self. And often I would think, like I have seen Ujjwal depicting one of the works of Muruganar Swami in a dance. In that, Muruganar Swami says, Ramanane Kaatchi Parpala Kaatinai Manakkannule. You showed me such many divine visions in my mind. So that is what Muruganar Swami is saying. So in depiction, one would normally think of it as seeing something as an extraordinary, as a happy, smiling person who is seeing all these visions. But strangely, Bhagavan made Ujjwal interpret it as saying, I don't want all these visions. I don't want these visions. As if he's afraid of all these visions because it comes and goes. And ultimately, this division does not exist. The great ones give us many examples. They say, like gold in ornaments of gold, mud in the earthen pot, or like water in the wave. And we can also think about the example of like images in a movie. So in images in a movie, there is no physical demarcation also, unlike ornaments of gold. They're all gold, but there's some apparent physical demarcation. But in images in a film, there is no physical demarcation. They are all only light, pure light. But for us, they appear to be images. If each of these images were to start thinking, I am different from the other, how true would that be? That's how true is this Vishwa, this world which we perceive, having separated ourselves from the self. Because of the Bhagavan says in Ramana Gita, because of the consciousness pervading the body, samsari manujo bhavet, what happens is the person starts thinking, I am, this body is the consciousness, it is its source. And Bhagavan, out of the greatest of grace and compassion, is taking us back to the source, telling us you need not look anywhere else for any answer. Because we do tend to look for karanas, we tend to look for solutions outside. But every one of these solutions, even the best of them, will be temporal, they will pass away. And as Bhagavan would also say, they do not stand to the test of even one night's deep sleep. So, where is the question of our relying on these solutions at any point of time? Let us turn back by His grace to that ultimate and only solace and abide there, because that is, Sadhu Om Swami says, எதை கற்றுக் கொடுக்க குரு உரு எடுத்து வந்தீரோ அதை கற்றுக் கொடுங்களையா. You teach me that for which you have taken this form of the Guru, the form of Dakshinamurthy that we have heard of, and the same which is now the form of Ramana, which has come to teach us, not only to teach us from outside, but to draw us from within as the self into that great solace. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ram.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana.